You ever wake up one day and feel like everything around you has shifted, even though you haven't moved an inch? That was me, the morning after my 50th birthday. The house was quiet. My kids were grown and living their own lives. My career, well, let's just say it didn't light me up the way it used to. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw a familiar face, but the eyes staring back at me felt different. Not older, necessarily. Just a little more curious, a little more unsure, and truthfully a little more scared. You know, people talk about life after 50 like it's some kind of winding down phase. Retirement talk starts floating around, health screenings become more frequent, and suddenly, every magazine headline is telling you what to avoid, how to slow down, or what not to wear after a certain age. But I started to realize something. Maybe this wasn't the beginning of the end. Maybe it was the start of a brand new chapter. And let me tell you, change didn't come knocking gently on my door. It barged in. It brought uncertainty, yes, but it also brought opportunities one never expected. Today, I want to share with you what embracing change after 50 really looked like for me. The hard parts, the hopeful moments, the practical shifts, and the surprising things I learned about myself along the way. We'll talk about how to navigate emotional changes, rediscover purpose, make peace with aging, and build a life that feels even more authentic than ever before. But before we keep going, I'd love your help with something. If you're enjoying this video so far, comment Y below. If not, comment N. It helps me know what's working and what to improve. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Now let's dive deeper. The first thing I had to face was this. I didn't know who I was without my old roles. For so long, I was someone's mom, someone's spouse, someone's coworker. I knew how to juggle schedules, lead meetings, cook dinner, clean up messes, and be there for everyone else. But when the dust settled and life got quieter, I realized I didn't know what I actually wanted anymore. It was unsettling, but it was also the beginning of something powerful. I remember reading a study published in the journal Psychological Science that said our sense of self continues to change even into our 70s and 80s. That was eye-opening to me. It meant I wasn't finished. I wasn't a fixed version of myself. I could still grow, shift, become. So, I gave myself permission to explore. And I started small. One day, I signed up for a watercolor painting class. Now let me tell you, I hadn't held a paintbrush since middle school. But there I was, surrounded by other beginners, laughing at our messy attempts and feeling alive. Not perfect, not polished, just present. That moment sparked something. I realized that reinventing yourself after 50 isn't about dramatic overhauls. It's about listening to what lights you up, even just a little, and following that. Maybe for you it's writing, or learning to play the piano, or finally taking that solo trip you've been dreaming about for years. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It just has to make sense to you. Of course, change also brings up fear. There were days I questioned myself constantly. I'd think, what am I even doing? Is this silly? Am I too old for this? But here's something that helped me. I reframed those questions. Instead of asking, am I too old for this? I started asking, why not now? It was a small shift, but it made a big difference. Suddenly, my age didn't feel like a limitation. It felt like a badge of experience. A reminder that I'd already made it through so much in life, so why not keep going? One night, I came across a quote from Carl Jung that really stuck with me. The afternoon of life is just as full of meaning as the morning, only its meaning and purpose are different. That gave me goosebumps. It reminded me that this phase of life isn't about chasing what I used to be. It's about embracing who I'm becoming. Another thing I realized, the body changes and it changes fast. I won't sugarcoat it, my energy wasn't what it used to be. My knees cracked a little louder, and let's just say I've become very well acquainted with Epsom salts. But instead of ignoring those changes or resenting them, I decided to get curious. I started moving differently, not harder but smarter. I swapped out intense workouts for more mindful movement. Yoga, walking, light strength training. According to Harvard Medical School, even 15 to 30 minutes of walking a day can significantly reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease and support brain health. That was enough motivation for me to lace up my sneakers. The more I moved, the better I felt, not just physically but emotionally too. It became a ritual, a time to think, to breathe, to reconnect with myself. What surprised me the most, though, was how my mindset began to shift. I wasn't chasing who I used to be. I was starting to appreciate who I was right now. And that, more than anything, was the biggest turning point. I'll talk more about how I handled the emotional shifts, the doubts, and the unexpected grief that comes with major life transitions in just a moment. Because yes, even good changes come with grief. The grief of letting go of old identities, of dreams that didn't happen, of the version of life you thought you'd have by now. But here's the good news. That grief doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're human. It means you're evolving. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. This video is for informational purposes only and is based on publicly available research. Everyone's health is different, so always consult your doctor or a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your lifestyle, diet, or exercise routine. Scientific knowledge is always evolving, and what works for one person may not work for another. Now, picking up where we left off, grief. That word surprised me when it first popped up in my thoughts. Not because someone had passed away, but because I was mourning versions of myself I had to leave behind. I remember sitting alone one afternoon, holding an old photo of my kids when they were little. It hit me all at once. The mom I used to be, the daily routines, the little hands that used to hold mine, they were gone. Not in a tragic way, just in that slow, quiet way that life changes without asking for your permission. And it wasn't just about parenthood. It was about the job title I'd left behind. The dreams I never quite got around to chasing. The friendships that slowly faded as our paths diverged. It felt like I was shedding layers of an identity I'd worn for decades, and I didn't know who I'd be without them. But you know what I learned? Grieving is part of growing. According to Dr. Nancy Schlossberg, a leading expert in adult transitions, every transition begins with an ending. It's that ending that throws us off balance. We resist it because it's uncomfortable. But if we allow ourselves to sit in that discomfort, just for a little while, it opens the door to something new. I gave myself permission to grieve. I allowed the tears. I talked to friends, journaled, and even spoke with a therapist, which I highly recommend to anyone navigating major life changes. It wasn't always pretty, but it was necessary. That space I created between who I was and who I was becoming turned out to be the most sacred part of the journey. During that time, I also realized how deeply we tie our worth to productivity. If I wasn't accomplishing something big, I felt like I was falling behind. But then I came across a study from Stanford University showing that emotional well-being actually increases with age. People in their 50s and 60s report greater life satisfaction than those in their 30s and 40s, primarily because they've learned to savor the moment and prioritize what truly matters. That blew my mind. It made me think, what if I didn't need to do more? What if I just needed to be more present? So, I started practicing something incredibly simple, mindfulness. Nothing fancy. No sitting cross-legged on a mountaintop. Just little things, pausing while sipping my morning coffee, taking a few deep breaths before reacting, noticing the breeze during my walk instead of rushing through it. And slowly, I felt myself grounding again. It wasn't about becoming a new person. It was about peeling back the noise and rediscovering the person I'd always been underneath. I also started reconnecting with people in new ways. After 50, your social circle can shrink. People move, retire, or get busy with their own lives. At first, I saw that as a loss, but I started reaching out more intentionally. I called old friends. I joined a local book club, where, by the way, I didn't know a single soul at first, and said yes to coffee invites even when I felt a little shy. And guess what? New relationships began to bloom. They weren't based on shared work projects or school schedules. They were based on real conversations about dreams, fears, faith, and the weirdness of navigating this stage of life. If there's one thing I'd tell my younger self, it's this: connection doesn't have to end when your old routines do. But it does take a little courage to rebuild it. I want to pause here and say, if you're feeling stuck or isolated, it doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're in transition. That place between no longer and not yet. And that space, while it can feel scary, is also where all the magic happens. You are not too late. You are right on time. Another shift I made was with how I defined purpose. For years, I thought purpose had to mean something grand, a career achievement, a big goal, or some dramatic reinvention. But then I started noticing how deeply satisfying the little things were. Helping a neighbor with their groceries, teaching my grandson how to bake banana bread, or just sending a kind message to someone who needed it. I realized that purpose doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers, and if you're quiet enough, you'll hear it in the everyday moments. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai, which loosely translates to reason for being. It's not about one giant mission. It's about the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can offer. And for many of us, that shifts as we age. My ikigai now: being present, listening more, sharing what I've learned, loving well. It may not win any awards, but it gives my life deep meaning. So if you're sitting there wondering what your purpose is after 50, start by asking yourself, what lights me up, even a little? Who do I love helping? What could I do for hours and lose track of time? The answers might surprise you, and they might just lead you to your next adventure. There's one more piece of this puzzle that we can't ignore, and that's how we take care of our emotional and mental health as we adapt to change. In the next part, I want to share the tools that help me stay grounded, bounce back from setbacks, and keep a positive outlook, even on the days I didn't feel so optimistic. Because yes, there were those days, and there still are. But just like the seasons, they pass. And with the right support and habits, we don't just survive them, we grow stronger because of them. Let's talk about that next. There's something powerful about getting through a hard season and realizing you're still standing. Not unchanged, maybe, but definitely stronger. I'll be honest with you, even after finding new routines, practicing mindfulness, and rebuilding my sense of purpose, I still had days where I questioned everything. Days when the mirror didn't feel kind. Days when the silence in the house felt louder than ever. Days when I wondered if the best parts of life were already behind me. And that's why I want to talk about emotional resilience, because change isn't a straight line. It's messy. It loops back. Some days you feel unstoppable. Other days, it's an achievement just to get out of bed and make coffee. I remember one afternoon, not long after I'd left my job, I sat on the porch with a heavy heart. A good friend had just moved away. I'd had a doctor's appointment that left me feeling vulnerable, and I'd spilled coffee on my new blouse, all in one day. And as silly as it sounds, I felt like I was unraveling. But then something interesting happened. I started thinking about a time years earlier when I was juggling toddlers, working late hours, and surviving on caffeine and stubbornness. That version of me had also felt lost sometimes, but she got through it. She figured things out. She learned to laugh in the chaos. And somewhere deep down, that woman was still in me. That was the turning point. I stopped seeing change as something happening to me and started seeing it as something happening for me. That small mental shift, from victim to participant, was everything. Psychologists call this cognitive reframing. It's the process of intentionally changing how we interpret a situation. And it's powerful. According to research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, people who practice reframing tend to have lower levels of stress and greater emotional well-being. So I started doing it. When I caught myself thinking, I'm too old to try this, I'd change it to, I've never been this free to explore. When I worried, what if I fail? I'd counter with, what if I surprise myself? And let me tell you, this isn't just fluff. It rewires your brain. Studies in neuroplasticity show that our brains continue forming new neural pathways well into later adulthood. That means your mindset is never set in stone. It's flexible, moldable. You can literally train yourself to think differently. Of course, it's not magic. Some days, the negative thoughts are louder. That's when having a toolkit matters. For me, journaling has been a lifesaver. Not fancy journaling, just 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. I write what I'm feeling, what I'm grateful for, and one small thing I want to focus on that day. It clears my head and reminds me that even on the messy days, there's always something good. Movement helps too. I'm not running marathons here, but I walk every morning. No headphones, just me and the birds. That walk does more for my mental health than any motivational quote ever could. And let's talk about rest for a second, because that's something we weren't taught to value when we were younger. But good sleep, quiet time, and slowing down aren't indulgent. They're essential. A study from the National Institutes of Health found that consistent rest helps regulate mood, boosts cognitive function, and reduces symptoms of anxiety and depression, especially in adults over 50. If we're going to embrace change, we need to support ourselves through it. And that means being gentle with ourselves, too. That was a big one for me, learning to speak to myself the way I'd speak to a dear friend. I used to beat myself up for not having it all figured out, for gaining a few pounds, for forgetting things. But I wouldn't dare speak to someone I love like that. So why was I doing it to myself? Self-compassion doesn't mean making excuses. It means telling yourself, I'm doing the best I can with what I have, and that's enough right now. It's freeing. It creates space to grow, without shame hovering over you. And here's another truth I wish more people talked about. Joy and sadness can live in the same moment. There were times I laughed so hard with my grandkids, only to cry quietly later because I missed when my kids were that little. Or when I felt proud of a new project, but still missed the routine of my old job. Life doesn't have to be one thing or the other. You can be healing and hopeful, grieving and grateful. This emotional flexibility, researchers say, is actually a marker of mental health. The ability to feel many things at once and not judge yourself for it. That's emotional maturity. And the older I get, the more I realize how much strength that really takes. I also want to talk about the role of community in all of this. We are not meant to navigate transitions alone. Whether it's family, friends, a faith group, a support group, or even an online community, connection is critical. There was a time when I didn't want to burden anyone with how I was feeling. But the moment I started opening up, really opening up, I discovered I wasn't alone. Almost everyone over 50 is carrying something invisible. A fear, a regret, a loss, a dream that hasn't come true yet. And sharing those truths doesn't make us weak. It connects us. It reminds us that aging isn't about fading away. It's about showing up more authentically. That's why I wanted to tell this story. Not because I've done everything right, but because I've lived through the mess and the doubt and come out more whole than I ever expected. Change after 50 isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of a more honest chapter, one where you finally get to define life on your terms. In the final part of this journey, I'll share the most important lessons I've learned about letting go, embracing possibility, and celebrating the beauty of right now. And I'll give you a few simple, powerful steps you can take today to start writing your own next chapter. Because trust me, it's going to be a good one. Looking back, I can honestly say this journey, while not easy, has been one of the most transformative chapters of my life. If someone had told me years ago that my 50s and beyond would be the time I'd come most alive, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally let go of trying to be perfect, I wouldn't have believed them. And yet, here I am. There's something incredibly freeing about realizing that the opinions that once held you back don't matter as much anymore. That the goals you once chased were sometimes more about proving something than truly living. And that real peace doesn't come from everything going your way. It comes from learning how to stay grounded even when they don't. So let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered together. We began this journey by talking about the initial discomfort of change, how even when life seems steady, something beneath the surface often starts to shift. We explored how transitions can catch us off guard, even when they come with age, retirement, loss, or the changing roles we play in our families and communities. We talked about the science behind change, how our brains are wired for adaptation, how purpose keeps us energized, and how even small habits like walking, journaling, or just pausing to breathe can help us recenter. We dove into mindfulness, movement, and mindset, tools anyone can use to ease anxiety and open up to what's next. Then we talked about the deeper emotional journey, the moments of doubt, the days that feel like backsliding, and the incredible power of reframing your thoughts. We talked about self-compassion, emotional resilience, and how joy and sorrow can coexist in a beautifully human way. And we also acknowledged the importance of connection, that community, vulnerability, and honest conversation are essential ingredients in feeling whole again. So now, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a few takeaways that I hope will stay with you, not just as ideas, but as quiet nudges when life feels uncertain. First, you are not behind. There is no timeline. There's no race. Life after 50 isn't about catching up. It's about catching your breath. And maybe for the first time, asking yourself what you truly want. Second, curiosity is your best companion. Instead of fearing what comes next, try asking, what else is possible for me? You might find a new hobby, a new friend, a new purpose, or even a new version of yourself you didn't know was waiting. Third, you're allowed to change, to pivot, to evolve. You don't owe consistency to anyone else's expectations, not even your own from 10 years ago. You're allowed to outgrow things, even if they once defined you. Fourth, don't underestimate the power of small wins. Drinking more water, going for that walk, calling a friend, turning off your phone to enjoy a quiet moment. All of these add up. Momentum builds slowly, and that's okay. You're planting seeds. And finally, the best part of your life doesn't have to be something you look back on. It can be what you're walking into, right now, with a little more grace, a little more humor, and a lot more heart. There's a quote I came across once that stuck with me. It said, "The most beautiful thing about growing older is that you grow into yourself." And I've found that to be true. With each year, I've felt more grounded in who I am, less tied to who I'm not, and more willing to walk through doors I wouldn't have even noticed before. If you're standing at the edge of a change right now, uncertain of how it will turn out, I want to say this. You've already made it through 100% of your hardest days so far. You have strength in your bones, wisdom in your story, and a heart that still beats with purpose. That is more than enough. Start where you are. Take one step, then another. You don't need the whole map, just enough light to see the next move. And most importantly, be kind to yourself along the way. You're learning, you're healing, you're growing, and that deserves patience and celebration. We'd really love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions for future topics or questions you want answered, write to us in the comments below. We're here to help, and your input could inspire our next video. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on more practical tips for healthy aging. Here's to living your best life at any age.